So today I wanted to go through and just look at some of the end-user capabilities that the PivotGrid, specifically the WinForm PivotGrid, gives us. I see a lot of our customers really not taking full advantage or making available to their end users a lot of the capacities that the control actually has. So I hope this is going to be a very interactive session. Hopefully won't go more than maybe 30 to 45 minutes worth of content. So if you have any questions, please jump in any time, and let's get rolling. So I think the first thing that I really want to do, well, yeah, we've got the agenda. We'll go through a bunch of stuff. How about that? That's enough of an agenda for me. But one of the first things I wanted to do is really review the various visual elements. And this is a really busy graphic that I'm showing. This is actually ripped straight out of our documentation, so you can search through the documentation and find out this same graphic and look at all the components. But I really wanted to look at them all. Now, the graphic that we're looking at here has a bunch of outlined parts with different colors to show which parts they are, but there should not be any coloring. There should be just the normal, battleship gray sort of look and feel, and the highlights are just to show, what parts are what. So if we start at the top, though, we have a group of different header sections, starting with a filter header and a data header and a column and row headers. These are the primary areas that users wind up interacting with, so that if they want to really change the display or if they really want to pivot the data in different mechanisms, they can deal with the fields that wind up going here. Now, hopefully you're familiar with PivotGrid and you understand the concept that you have the data fields coming from a database, but then you have the pivot fields that represent the way that the PivotGrid will look at those data fields coming from the database. So these header areas are where you can wind up allowing your users to wind up manipulating those various PivotGrid fields. You can see inside of each field that is in a column or row header area, you get some different options. Specifically, you can see that there's a filter button. We'll look at the filters more closely here in a little bit. But you also have the sort capabilities to be able to sort the information different. One of the ones that quite often gets overlooked is the grouped field connector. You can see this little tiny blue box. I'm hovering my mouse over it right now. That little line that shows up in there, and I know you can't see the little line, but trust me, it's there. That's representing that we actually wind up having the fields associated with each other inside of a group. And the advantage of doing that is now I can move these two fields together as a single unit, but I can also collapse them with this little down arrow, meaning that the group is currently expanded. I can actually click this in the real world, and this would collapse down to where we only have category. Along with this, we also have the various headers for our columns. You can see, depending on the column fields that we have here, we have these headers that relate to those fields, but you also have the total headers so that we have a summarization at each level of the various totals. Then we have all the different ways that the data is actually displayed in here. You can see we have the various total areas. In this one, the grand total is at the far bottom and far right. We can also wind up seeing that we can have different types of totals. Here you can see that we have for produce, the min, max, average, and summary totals for all of our data. I see a lot of developers, when they start using the control, kind of miss the capability of giving their end users a lot more information by giving them these automatic summarizations. So it looks like someone is saying my sound is from a barrel, and I apologize for that. Let me actually check one thing before. No, looks like my audio is as good as I can get it right now. Sorry about that. So in here, we also show that you can wind up having some empty area if your grid's large enough. And then down at the bottom, we also see that we have the pre-filter panel that can pop up depending on how you have that set. So let's go ahead and take a look at some more of the visual elements, and then we'll start looking at a demo of this stuff. Now, this one's really interesting, and I find it almost always overlooked, where you can wind up adding a customization or showing a customization form. By default, we use the simple format of this, and you can see here I have 3 different fields inside this customization form. But all this is showing you is the fields that are currently hidden from the end user. And the end user could then take elements out of this customization form and put them into their grid in some meaningful way. But on the right-hand side, we have the Excel 2007 styled grid. And this really takes that same hidden area. You can see the same 3 fields at the top of the form on the right. And it's still, those are just the hidden fields, so the end user would never see those if they weren't looking at this form. But it also has boxes for each of the different areas that are in the pivot grid. So here I can wind up directly manipulating how the pivot grid is laid out. I can also defer the layout. You can see this little checkbox down here. And then that way I can make a bunch of changes, and if this is enabled, then this update would be enabled as well. And then I can say, okay, I've made all the changes I want. Let's look at how it looks. And once again, I'll walk through a demo of what this looks like and how you can manipulate it yourself. And by far, and I'm guilty of this myself, by far the single most overlooked and I think powerful feature that we wind up having for end users is this filter editor. There's lots of different ways to do filtering. There's lots of different ways to control what data is being represented. But this is a really nice graphical way that people can really see all of the conditions that are manipulating our data at any particular time. And then we get this nice pre-filter panel showing us whatever the filter is that we've applied to our data. And we've got a little checkbox that we can turn it on and off very easily. And then finally, the last thing, well, here's a quick list of the various end user capacities, capabilities. And I'm not going to walk through each of these. I did leave a link to the help documentation that will walk through these. And I kind of urge you, no matter how much detail I go into today, walking through these yourself, they'll really show you how much power you can wind up giving to the end user. And then the big one to me is once we enable a bunch of features for the end user can really wind up manipulating all this nicely. How do we wind up making sure that the end user can get back there? So the last thing I'm going to talk about today is how we can actually save and restore some of the layouts that your end user winds up making. So with that, let me go and do a demo because I think slides are boring and I'm already boring myself. So let's see here. How do I get out of that? There we go. So what I have here It's a really, really simple project. I've got 2 forms. The first form is actually got the regular DevExpress grid in it, just so that I can show you some data. And then I have a second form here, form 2, that has our pivot grid, and I've already got it all laid out. Let's first look at the data that I'm using here. I have a sample database. It's the Contoso. It happens to be their version 2 of data. And what I've done is I've really flattened out their data quite a bit. So let's go ahead and take a look at this SQL. It's really an ugly SQL statement, but it really winds up bringing in all of the data around all the sales that Contoso's had. Now, just because of load times during the demo, I have restricted the data down to just the reseller sales, but there's also online sales and several other types. It's just if I don't do this, we'll wind up with over 2 million rows, and for performance during a demo, that won't work real well. So that's our data that we're going to look at real quick. And let me go ahead and show you what this looks like in its rawest form. I'm going to run the project, and right now form 1 is going to come up with just that grid control. Probably going to come up on the wrong window though. Let's see. You can see, so yeah, just came up. So this is form 1. It's here's all the raw information. You can see we've got lots of data. So even restricting it to just reseller sales winds up still being quite a lot of data. So let's take a look at what this looks like in a pivot grid. So we'll go and change this around. Sorry, I need to look around my microphone, although I guess my microphone's not doing a great job to be able to type. Okay, so let's look at this in a pivot grid, and we'll look at each of the different parts of that pivot grid instead of that nasty graphic that I have. So you can see, even restricting it to resellers, the data takes a little while to load up. And I have right now the sales amount in our data area, and I have the product name here in my rows, and then I have year in my columns. Now, remember I had talked about grouping. Well, here I've got quarter and month grouped, and if I do this right, hopefully, yes, there. You can see the little line right here showing that these elements are grouped. And if I go ahead and collapse, there we go. You can see the month gets hidden, and it simplifies the representation of the data inside the pivot grid. Let me collapse it back down a year. So grouping is a really good way to get a lot more information in there for your user. And the advantage here is that I can actually now, if I decide to move this, you can see I get that whole group of fields moving all at one time. So that makes it really convenient for an end user. Instead of having to drag, month, quarter, year, into this area, they can do it all in one step. Now remember, I had talked about the different header areas. We have the filter header area here at the top. You can see I've got a bunch of different fields in here. So these aren't hidden fields. They're fields that I could potentially filter on. But all I've done is move sales amount into the data header area up here, which then represents that information down here as part of the grid. I've then moved the product information, or it's actually the product name, into the row header, and then of course the date information into the column header. Now the nice thing is you actually have the capacity to go ahead and hide any of these headers that you'd like to. There's a group of properties. Let me go ahead and take a look at those properties. So if we go into our designer, oops, there we go, and pull up the properties for the pivot grid, the properties here are, they quite often are nested properties, so we have objects that then have properties that allow us to group various types of properties. In this instance, I'm going to be looking at the options view set of properties, and you can see here that I have a set of show type of properties. Specifically, here's like the show filters header, and if I set this to false, you can see over here, even at design time, the filter area winds up disappearing from the end user. While this definitely reduces the ability for the end user to customize their layout and really see the data in a meaningful way for them, it does allow you a good amount of control so that you can wind up taking some of the power away, if you will. In other words, doing much more dictation of what the view is going to be instead of giving them so much freedom. But you can see here we've got the filters. One that was new to me even, there's a little filter bar separator. You can see the little bar. So we give you a lot of fine-grained control, a lot of UI type of elements control. And in this webinar, I'm not really going to go into detail about the other UI-related tweaks you could make, because an end user can't do the hardcore things. So basically, this is just about what an end user can wind up doing. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to the runtime instance and look at what we can do. Now, anywhere I have a field, it could either be in my filter area or into my columns and rows. I can wind up doing sorting. You can see here I have sorted by year, and if I just click that to where I get this little down arrow to change, I can wind up resorting the years. You can see here I'm sorting from oldest, from newest to oldest, and I can reverse that very easily. And I could do that for products as well, or any other. What really becomes nice is specifically the filter area. You can see here I've got a list of the quantities. So here's all of the quantities to where now I can wind up filtering out. So I specifically just want to find out, what are our biggest quantity order value for. So I click OK, and now you can see I have, without having to bring any information down into the visual area, I've filtered out a bunch of data, and now I'm looking at just the biggest quantities of order groups. Now, of course, we've got the ability, let me go ahead and show all my orders here. We've got the ability to show more information. So this is really, if you ask me, a lousy set of data to try and look at from the product perspective. So something more meaningful might be to bring in the subcategory. I'm going to actually bring in the subcategory for the product, which kind of is odd that I'm sorting by subcategory. But this allows me to actually see that here I've got Bluetooth headphones, and here are all the different products that fall into that category of product. And you can see an end user can go ahead and collapse this one category or collapse all of these. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse this one, and you can see here my camcorders come next. Or if I collapse all, now I'm just looking at the subcategories. So end users really have a lot of capability around this and the ability to really see data exactly how they want to. So then let's go ahead and take a look at that show field list. Now, I really find that end users really don't understand the right-click capability of any sort of application. And when was the last time that, your wife or your mother-in-law or whatever, whoever you wind up doing family tech support for, when was the last time they wound up saying, wow, I solved that problem by right-clicking and finding the context menu, right? So I kind of encourage developers to add buttons or some other mechanism to be able to do the actions in these context menus. But for us developers, you know, the lofty smart ones, I guess, right-clicking and seeing that we can see the pre-filter or the field list, or we can actually reload the data. This is particularly useful if you're dealing with where you could edit the data. You also have a context menu when you right-click on the fields. You can see a lot of the same information, but you can also do things that you could do graphically. You could, you know, resort things, but here you can do them through a context menu. Notice this hide mechanism is actually not enabled right now. We'll look at what that takes to enable in a minute. We also have the capabilities on the different header areas. You can see we can sort by the different elements. So instead of clicking these different little glyphs in the field, I can actually right-click and get these sort capabilities, no problem. So let's take a look at that field list. You can see here I have the simple field list represented, and I don't have any hidden fields. So let's go ahead and take a look back and notice now when I right-click on a field, I actually can hide the fields now. This is actually an option. You can let end users hide the field at any time, or by default just hide the field once you've enabled this field list dialog to pop up. So you can see if I go ahead and click hide on this, it moves from the filter area down into this field list. And in reality, I could also drag and drop fields into that list as well. And then again, I can drag and drop them out. Now, this field is, this dialog is interesting, but like I said, remember we have the ability to show a much more detailed form. So if we go ahead and take a look at this, go back to our properties, and once again, one of our nested capabilities here, we have one of the sets of properties is around customization. And in here, because we're dealing with the customization form, we have the ability to specify the, let me make that a little wider, the customization form style. And you can see right now it's set to simple, and we have the options of simple and Excel 2007 style. We also have the ability to customize the layout, stacked default, and a bunch of different other layouts. But basically, this just means how the windows inside that dialog box are going to wind up getting laid out when we wind up running it. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that new form looks like now that I've gone to the more complex form. See, aren't you glad I didn't load all the data, even though that data takes, and I am loading this, it's a local SQL Server, on my own box, so a lot of stuff going on my own box here, so a little bit of a delay. So let's go ahead and look at the field list. You can see here's that field list. Now, one of the nice things is we actually give you a control so that at design time, you could add this same dialog box to your base window. So you could actually have this inside of your window all the time and let your users see it. I kind of encourage that if you do that, also give them a way to hide it so that they can just look at their data once it's laid out the way they want it. But you can see here, I can go ahead and drag and drop items up into the hidden area. I can go ahead and still hide things. I like this because I can say defer updates, and now I can wind up coming down here and making some changes. So if I'm going to add subcategory here, and maybe I'm going to add returns down here, and now when I push update, that is going to wind up applying the changes that I just made inside of this dialog box. You can see, so now we have the amount of returns, we have the subcategories here. Let me collapse those. By the way, the Contoso data is really strange. I mean, they have very few returns in reality. I worked retail all through college, so I know that returns are usually much higher than this. So someone cooked up some strange data here. Now, remember I had said you can choose the style based on the drop-down list that I'd shown in the property dialog. Well, here are the different styles, and you can see you can allow, by default, your end user to view this however they want, so they can wind up manipulating this any way they would like to see it. Now, you can hide this capability so that an end user will only see what you decide that they should see. But, you know, different users, different things, so. All right. Sorry, having no issues on a dual monitor scenario. So let's take a look. I already showed you this pop-up for the filtering, and I'm showing a particularly large set of filters, so that's probably not a great one. Let's go ahead and do quantity again. You can see that in this instance, by default, we allow people to select multiple elements without difficulty. You can also set this up to be in radio mode. So let's take a look at how you wind up doing that. So in our dialog properties, once again, we have one of our groups of properties here. This is the filter pop-up set of properties. And you can see, is radio mode false? That's our default and setting it to false. But if we set this to true, then an end user is only going to be able to select one thing out of that group. So when you turn that to true, you can see here we have several different options of exactly how to control the experience. It's interesting to play with the different sets of experiences you can create with these different properties. It gives you a lot of capabilities and allows your end user to see exactly what you want them to see. So let's take a look here. We'll do, what do I do? Quantities, so let's do that again. Now you can see my checkboxes are gone, and I can select that one element at a time. So now I can do that. Oops, come on. So very different way of seeing it that allows your user to zoom in on one particular type of data at any one point in time, or of course they can do show all. Now, I mentioned the hiding capability. Let's go ahead and take a look at the properties once again. I guess I should pin this. There we go. So in our customization capabilities here, one of the properties that we can wind up setting is the allow hide. Here we go. So here you can see the default of when customization form visible, but you can also never let the end user hide fields or always let them hide fields. I pretty much go on the always. The only problem is that if an end user doesn't know about the customization form and they accidentally hide a field, they may never see that field again until they call you up and say, why is your application broken? I don't see sale prices anymore in our data set. Okay, let me fix your problem here. So do be a little careful with that setting, but it's a good one. Also, there's a really interesting one, let's see here, that I think a lot of people don't play with. And here under options behavior, we have the use async mode, and by default, it's turned off because this isn't going to help you in the actual data load time, but it's going to help you in the perceived time that the PivotGrid is doing things to your end user. So let me show you exactly what I mean here. So I'm going to run it, and you can see it's still going to take the same amount of time to actually load the data and load up the PivotGrid. But once we've done that, then we're going to be able to have some nice user feedback. So here, if you remember, certain of these actions that I was doing took a while. So here with subcategory, I'm going to add that to my rows here. And you can see I get this nice little pop-up UI that says, hey, I'm working. So you don't have to have, you don't have to remember to turn your cursor to anything. You get some really good end-user feedback there. But what's also happening in the background is that we're doing our work within the PivotGrid on a separate background thread. Great. So I'm being told I just lost connectivity. Amanda, am I there? Oh, Amanda, anybody?
What's going on, Woody?
GoToMeeting just told me I lost connectivity, but now it says that connection has been reestablished, so I guess I'm back on air.
We never lost you.
Oh, I feel so good that I have not been lost. I guess I won't trust GoToMeeting quite as much. Okay.
Sometimes it does that. I don't know why.
Okay, never mind. Good to know. All right. So let's see. So what I was saying is, once again, when we're using the async mode, we're doing our work in the background. So that's all goodness also, because if you have other UI elements, you can stay responsive, but still give your end user some of that feedback that, hey, it's grinding in the background. So I like the async mode quite a bit. I'd readily suggest its utilization. And the last thing I wanted to go into is, oh, you know what? I didn't even go to that. Hold on, wait. The last pop-up I wanted to show here was this pre-filter. Now, we've talked about the different, filtering capabilities. Like here with years, I could filter out. You can see I can even filter out any grouped information here, and that's all goodness. But remember, we talked about the pre-filter and its dialog down here. This is, to me, where if an end user can be taught to use this, then they can really manipulate data in a great way. So I'm going to go ahead and add an element here. And I'm going to say, well, let's stick with the theme we were doing about quantity. So I'm going to do, okay, when my quantity, and I can set the condition is greater than, and then I can wind up setting a value, and here's the same sort of filter list. And so I'm going to go ahead and say greater than that value, and hit apply. You can see in real time, I'm seeing the data get manipulated, but I also, you can see down here, get a visual representation of what the filter currently is. And I can go ahead and add conditions or remove conditions very easily. I can also go ahead and, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Hold on. There we go. Add group, add a separate grouping, and get much more complex. So I can add some ORs in here. Excuse me. I can also go ahead and do all sorts of knots. I mean, any sort of typical Boolean filtering algorithm that you can think of can be developed with this. So it's quite nice. Yeah. Wow. I just filtered everything out. The really nice thing is once this is displayed, I can also re-show the editor quite easily, but I can also uncheck this in one fell swoop and be able to see the non-filtered condition. And then ultimately the end user can hide that as well. But this is all fantastic. This allows an end user to really hone in on the data that's very important to them, which I think is the real power of the pivot grid is, as a developer, I don't have to develop the contingency of everybody's view of the data in an organization. I can just say, here's a tool, now you guys view the data that's important to you. The problem is, as you can see in this instance, if I close this form and restart it, I'm going to have lost everything that I've done up to this point. So once this comes back up, I'll show you that if you remember, I had the subcategories over here in my rows. I had the months expanded in my group. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we can solve this problem, because by far, this is something that end users will wind up demanding very quickly. We have the capability, let me see if I can, there we go. Hey, wow, I still know what source code looks like. That's fantastic. We have the capability here, and I've already done some ready-made code here, to where we can use this code right here. Let's zoom in on that. So you can see here the pivot grid control that I have on my form has this method save layout to, and in this instance I'm using stream, but there's a whole host. You can also save it to the registry. You could also, with this stream, persist it into a database. However you want to wind up saving this information, we've got all the different methods for you to do it, and just definitely do it. Right here, I wind up opening up a file. Now, in this instance, this variable is at form load created, and I'm just pointing it at the executable subdirectory, which is a really bad best practice. There you go, bad best practice. Okay, wrap your head around that. It's only Thursday, so we should be able to do that. So I wouldn't do it like this if I were you, but you can see I'm going to open or create the file, I'm going to persist it to the stream, and then I'm going to close it. And then on the other side of this, here, let's uncomment this code out. If the file exists using the same file, then I'm going to wind up opening that stream, and then I'm going to do the restore layout. So let's go ahead and see this in action. So of course the form's going to come up in its normal default way. Let's hope that it pops up here soon. There we go. I think I'm using more and more memory on my computer, so it's moving slower and slower. So let's see here. Let's go ahead and add the subcategory. Here we go. And I'm going to go ahead and expand out to month. And now I'm going to wind up closing that down. So hopefully during form closing we have that show up. And if we take a look, so here is the default area, the debug subdirectory, and here's where the actual executable is sitting. And you can see here is my layout persist file. Now, I made it a text file just so that I could do this. I double-clicked on it so it would open, but I would not suggest making it a text file because ultimately some end user will come and muck about with this. But you can see here's a bunch of information about how the pivot grid itself was laid out at that moment. And if we go ahead and run it again, we will see that at least the fields information are where I left it. Now there's another mechanism that we have for saving collapsed state and other information. So here you can see, oh, look at that. I got subcategory into the data area. Oops. Should have put it down here. Sorry. But you can see here my quarter was still expanded. So it's this way, now an end user can really customize the view, and every time they run the application, they're back to that view that they had, so that they don't have to re-lay out all the different data the way they would want it to. And especially if you persist the collapsed state, then they would be all collapsed down to just the set of data that they're interested in. So then that way, they really get a lot of information just by quickly running your application. And hopefully that winds up saving you a lot of time for making customized reports, but also that winds up saving the end user a lot of time of having to set it up each different time. So with that, let me see here. It's time for this slide. So I see that there's been several questions. I don't know if any of these are for me or not. Yeah, if you have any questions, we'll hang on the line. My biggest request for everybody on the line is drop me an email. I'll help you with that. There we go. Drop me an email and let me know what you want to know about the Pivot Grid, about what we could do to show you more features, to help you understand how to use it better. I have to do these webinars, and I enjoy doing them because I get to interact with all of you, but I just need ideas so that I can actually know what I should be talking about. All right. Amanda, any questions?
Hey, Woody. Yeah, there's a question here from Mark Roberts. Are all of these properties available for the ASPX Pivot Grid control?
Yeah, so everything that I showed, obviously, except for the asynchronous capabilities, they're across the platform, so all the platforms. The different properties that you may set to get different things to do it might be sorted differently or under different elements. But yes, everything that I showed of persisting the layout, of doing the different sorting capabilities, all that sort of information. Yeah, I can't think of anything that we looked at that is not available. And if you just go to the demos up on devexpress.com, you'll see every feature that I showed actually running in real time for you. Anything else?
Yep, from Julio, Pivot Grid field list. Can I use it in web pages?
Yeah, so same thing. As a matter of fact, let me bring up some resources. So here is our website, and under demos, and this is my bad because these demos are so easy. I tend to point to these demos more than anything, but here under ASP, you can see we've got the Pivot Grid Suite demos, and there's all sorts of different categories here. But one of the best ones is this OLAP browser capabilities, to where I can wind up seeing all the different ways of looking at data. I'm clicking through way too quickly, I understand that, because I'm not seeing the demo that I had expected. Darn that. But you can wind up, controlling all the different capabilities. So just like I'd said about the different header capabilities and link forms, here I can go ahead and hide the filter. So now we only have the column, row, and data, and no filter. You can also do a lot of extra work, and I have written a couple of blog posts about how to do this for WinForms and ASP, where you can actually interact with the different pop-up menus, and you can add your custom pop-up information in here and add additional elements to these menu items. So there's a lot of capabilities in here. I would definitely suggest looking through these different demos. They are very complete in what you can do.
Hey, Woody, the team is suggesting the compact layout demo. I don't know if you see that.
Yes, that's the one. There we go. No? Is that? All right, what's the category? I've forgotten what it is. I hate this.
Appearance and layout?
There we go. Thank you, guys. By the way, who's talking to us from afar is the developer guys, and they're the really smart ones, and I'm always the one who's embarrassed and forget things. But so you can see what they specifically were trying to get me to show you correctly was here, even in WinForm or in ASP.NET, but we could have done this in WinForms as well. We're showing that customization dialog off to the side. So here I can do the same sort of things. I can defer layouts, and then I can move things around, and then do the update and get it to update information over here. This is a really powerful UI, but once again, notice it takes a lot of screen real estate away from the data. So you may want to make this hideable somehow if you can. Thank you very much. Dimitri, thank you. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, from Mark again. We are trying to export the ASPX pivot grid and would like to export the theme colors. Is that available?
I'm not sure what you mean, Mark, by export. Are you trying to represent it in a report? I mean, I'm into a PDF. I mean, just printing this. I'm not sure of the question. As well as, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not sure the answer. So hopefully, once again, the developers will save me and let us know that if you're exporting to like a PDF or something, if we can do the coloring capabilities in there. I'm pretty sure you can, but hopefully we'll get confirmation on that.
He says they'd like to see the exported data look exactly like it does on the web page.
Yeah, so by default, you're not going to be able to, our exporting capabilities into, PDFs or other, printed type of material are going to be fairly generic, but through some coding, you can get some of those theme elements, get it to look exactly like it does on the screen. There's lots of stuff you can do to get it real close, but I mean, everybody realizes, I think, the a HTML on-screen layout is going to be a little richer. Hopefully, we have some demos that I can point to, and in my follow-up blog post that I'll post either late today or tomorrow morning, I'll wind up giving some examples of exactly that. I hope. All right.
And then we have one more question, Woody. Could a user save and load several layouts for the same pivot grid to a database?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, using that same code that I showed and realizing that you can do this across the platforms, you can easily create some sort of dialogue to give them options of which view they would want to see at any point, and you just wind up loading that view with that stream of information, then reload the data or refresh the data, and they'll see everything that they need to. It's that's a very common scenario. Yeah.
All right, that's all the questions that we well, hold on, one more. Let's see. Is there anyone we could follow up with about exporting and exporting layout?
I will tell you what I always tell everybody is if you've never tried it, our support is just phenomenal. I think a little overworked maybe sometimes, but phenomenal. So I always encourage you to use support if you ever have any detailed questions. But also for this one, because I'll try and get a blog post up quickly about it, go ahead and look at my blog, and I'll have some information about exporting tomorrow. Unfortunately, I'm also going on vacation tomorrow for a week, so I can't follow up after that. But yeah, look, go up to Support Center and pose a question. If my blog post doesn't answer it for you well enough, and you'll get a response real quickly.
All right. Awesome.
Excellent.
Thanks so much, Woody.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, we have a whole lineup of webinars that are currently posted throughout September. We have amazing guest presenters and, of course, our DevExpress product training. So check them out and register at devexpress.com/webinars. A sneak peek into next week. Next Tuesday, August 9th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, charts, data binding approaches, taking advantage of your data. Learn about the various data binding approaches available to you when using DevExpress charting products. You can take advantage of your data to help you create some very engaging charts. Join us to see how. And then Wednesday, August 10th, working with report parameters. This session will explore the use of parameters within the Extra Report suite. This session will cover the ins and outs of parameters and have you up and running with this seldom used but very powerful feature. And then Thursday, August 11th, ASP.NET Grid View, add multiple checkbox column filters. Learn how to add a multiple checkbox column to allow your end users to filter more powerfully. Also, we are looking for your feedback. We're always looking to improve and want to target topics that our customers and the developer community are interested in. If you have feedback or suggestions on topics you'd like to see, please email me at webinars@devexpress.com. Those emails come directly to yours truly, and I would love to hear from you. All right, that said, if you missed anything from this webinar, or want to review any previous webinars, please visit us on the DevExpress channel at tv.devexpress.com. Again, thanks so much to Woody and to the team. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks for choosing DevExpress.